What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is iRate Reviews, the show where I go over a comic book, its story, its art, give you my impressions, and let you know whether it's something to talk to your shop about or not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about Ultimates Squared number 2. So this is the second issue of the reimagining, or basically the restarting, the second season of the Ultimates. And the Ultimates is a story by Ewing, which is really taking on the whole cosmic concept after Secret Wars. So this is picking up where Jonathan Hickman left off and taking that concept and running with it. So when we jump into the story here, what we see is Adam Brashear, Blue Marvel, really telling a story about his history. It's like how poor he was, those kind of things, and what those ideas really meant to him, and how he really grew up in that situation. And it ultimately culminates with a story about the snow, and we wonder why it is now snowing in space. But what we find is that when Monica Rambeau kind of taps into her cosmic awareness, it's not really snowing. This is actually the remnants of a long-lost multiverse. This is the remnants of a dying or dead universe that has kind of come to pass. And that's not necessarily a good thing. When we pick up in the next section, what we see Carol Danvers, and we see the interactions between Carol Danvers, Galactus the Lifebringer. We see her kind of in her Alpha Flight situation. So what we saw in issue number 1, where they were brought to Galactus to become essentially his heralds, to work with America Chavez and basically kind of solve the problem of eternity being chained, and who is this cosmic jailer, that kind of situation. And what we see is that she was none too happy about that. She wasn't really trusting in Galactus because he was a force of nature, basically a cosmic hurricane that would go and destroy things, a devourer of worlds for ages upon ages, and she wasn't quite ready for that. But America Chavez, one of her homies, decided that she put the words right, and she kind of won Carol over to her side. And when they kind of get into their briefing, she gets this starry little message of help that causes her to kind of have to leave this particular briefing. T'Challa excuses himself, and then they both end up on Galactus's ship. And that's where they kind of come in contact with this snow. And this snow is actually a remnant ghost of another kind of long-forgotten being. And who we see it is it's the Shaper of Worlds, essentially a living alien cosmic cube that had the power to manipulate the universe. And there's very interesting things going on. The thing is, everybody's kind of wondering after they have this conflict, and they, Brashear, basically, Blue Marvel kind of encapsulates this individual, and he's like, nothing dies, everything lives, I have gone beyond the cosmos, I have seen the far shore, everyone is there, everyone lives, and he's trying to relay this message, this kind of sense of urgency, this distress signal, so to speak, to these individuals, but it's not the individual that he was really looking for. Because who was he looking for? He was on Galactus' ship, so obviously he was looking for Galactus. And that's where we run into the second part of this story that kind of takes place at the exact same time. And that is Galactus and his herald, Conner Sims, are currently on the highest level of basically perception, where we're talking about constructs of the universe, of the multiverse itself. And we see the debut of the Living Tribunal in this situation, we see Master Order, we see Lord Chaos, and they are essentially holding a trial for Galactus, who is no longer the devourer of worlds, this force of destruction, and kind of, they were upsetting the balance. The Lifebringer is upsetting the balance, and they're making their case as to why he should be either reverted back to the Destroyer of Worlds, or be destroyed and replaced with somebody else. And you get the idea, there's a reference to the number of cosmos. So Galactus is a remnant of the 6th infinity. So what they're in right now is the 8th cosmos, and that's what the Living Tribunal references. So there's a 7th in there somewhere. And it's pretty interesting. And, like America Chavez references things like, basically we lost the entire multiverse, long story, that kind of stuff. Black Panther's just like, yeah, we don't need to talk about that right now. So there's a lot of things that some people don't know and that some people do that are a result of Secret Wars. But what we see is that this kind of trial is pretty open and shut. The Living Tribunal essentially judges their entire claim as completely insignificant, and to allow Galactus to go on his way and be the Lifebringer instead of the Destroyer of Worlds. And since everything kind of hasn't settled yet, that gives Order and Chaos a particularly conniving idea. But I don't really want to give that kind of stuff away, because the Ultimates Squared, the Ultimates 2, this is a really fun book. And the Art of Travel format isn't quite what I expected, because I really enjoyed the first series arc with Kenneth Rocafort. It's just taking me a little while to kind of get used to it. When we're talking about the highest level constructs and what he presents as far as Living Tribunal and Galactus in those situations, it just seems a little bit too off the wall. It's not necessarily rendered in kind of like precise manner, and I understand the concept that he's going for, things that are kind of fuzzy, almost imperceivable by humans, like concepts that aren't necessarily even fathomable in this situation. However, it's just one of those things where I don't necessarily think it helps out the reader to have things kind of appear in that manner. I would much rather have a little bit more rendering in that situation and to make it a little bit cleaner and clearer. However, I really like the art in other parts of the book, and it's really interesting to see how that kind of balances out, how he represented some things versus how he represents others, and I'd appreciate just a touch more consistency. However, as far as the story goes, basically, Al Ewing is diving into whatever bits of continuity he can to kind of create this tapestry that's going to unweave before us, or be weaved before us. I'm not really sure what I'm going to... It's time, it can kind of go forwards, it can go backwards, it can go sideways. You never really know what's going to be happening in these comic books, but it's interesting, and that's the key point. Ultimates is, if you want to have an idea regarding where the cosmic universe, the whole scope of the Marvel Universe is going, and what can potentially happen, especially the ramifications of Secret Wars and what's gone on since then, this is the book that you need to be reading. And even though the art isn't necessarily what I would consider up to snuff, it's not quite top tier level, it is still a really fun book, and it's a really good read, so it's definitely one of my recommendations. Highly suggest you guys go seek it out and start picking it up. So that's my review of Ultimate Squared number 2, but I want to know what you guys think, so hit me up in the comments down below, and we can start that conversation. As always, if you like what you see, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe right there to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.